One of the many passive-aggressive insults that workplace bullies love to hurl against the target is to call the target of workplace bullying, quote-unquote, immature, because name-calling is certainly very mature behavior. The immature insult translates as the target's perfectly understandable unwillingness to engage with workplace bullies on their level, which is the level of narcissistic ego. In other words, if you are a target of workplace bullying, you refuse to play the ego games and instead show up with your authentic self, which of course must mean that you are immature. And I'm sure the immature insult has absolutely nothing at all to do with the target's physical appearance alone, because no workplace bully would ever be that literal-minded. Just as I'm sure that if I were 65 years old or weighed 300 pounds, or if I were a man, that we would all be sitting here having this exact same conversation. Apparently, according to workplace bullies, the only way to be mature is to not have any feelings and to not express those feelings that you're not allowed to have in the first place. Calling a target of workplace bullying immature is a projection if I ever heard one. Workplace bullies are narcissists, and anyone who has ever dealt with a narcissist has complained that they feel as though they're dealing with a 3-year-old child. When people speak about the immaturity of narcissists, it's all about temper tantrums, yelling and screaming and stomping their little feet, which very well may be the case behind closed doors due to the whole street angel home devil characteristic of narcissists. However, I find in the workplace, it's not about temper tantrums. There is no yelling or screaming here, people. That's not how this stuff works. Workplace bullies are narcissists, and narcissists care about one thing and only one thing in this world or in this life, and that's their image, their reputation, how they look to other people, and what other people think of them. So they almost never do anything that can get back to them and make them look bad. The whole point of workplace bullying is that it needs to be as subtle, indirect, and passive-aggressive as possible, so the workplace bullies can never be called on their behavior. So when narcissistic workplace bullies want to throw a proverbial temper tantrum, it takes the form of one of the many workplace bullying techniques that I have identified. All the same, I find that narcissistic workplace bullies do behave like children, and also like animals. How are workplace bullies like children? Well, they have no empathy, no concept of time, and thus no concept of delayed gratification, and demand instead instant gratification, no impulse control, and not even any verbal skills. I argue that to identify a workplace bully, we can look for two things: no boundaries, no empathy. One of those, or both, will rear their ugly heads within minutes of meeting a workplace bully, sometimes even before you meet them over the phone or by email. All of the other characteristics of narcissism, the entitlement, the pathological jealousy, the pathological lying, the rage, the narcissistic smear campaign with flying monkeys recruited for abuse by proxy, and the gaslighting will appear later on down the line. But right from the get-go, we know we have a workplace bully on our hands because of the lack of boundaries and the lack of empathy, as in children. Now, some children can be very empathetic. We can see how some children exhibit care and concern for other living things, such as animals. However, the infant really doesn't care how exhausted his poor mother is. He's just going to keep screaming until he gets what he wants, which is exactly what workplace bullies do, just not literally. When you are dealing with a workplace bully, you are dealing with an infant screaming in a crib. However, no children have any boundaries. A toddler is, by definition, a little ball of ego bleeding out who does not know where he ends and other people begin. And workplace bullies don't have any boundaries either. Until a certain age, small children have a poor concept of time. They may not understand past, present, or future, which can be why they throw temper tantrums. If you say to a child, you can't have the cookie now, but you can have the cookie in 30 minutes, you get a temper tantrum because the child really doesn't understand in 30 minutes. Unfortunately, workplace bullies are exactly the same way. They're psychological rapists who do not take no for an answer. They want what they want, and they want it now, and they will not be ignored. If you are a non-narcissist, non-bully, and normal person, you understand that in a society with rule of law, no really does mean no, and there is this concept of consent. Workplace bullies do not speak the language of consent. They speak the language of entitlement. If you ever want to flush out a narcissistic workplace bully, all you have to do is one very simple thing. Put up a boundary with them, and that boundary is the word no. And if you do that, better duck, brace yourself, and prepare for a blood-splattering scene like something out of The Exorcist. Gaslighting's so crazy-making it will make your head explode. Or weeks or even months of vicious, mean-spirited, narcissistic abuse. According to workplace bullies, apparently, because of their faulty concept of time, first impressions are everything. Again, if you are a non-narcissist, non-bully, and normal person, you thoroughly enjoy the infinite, intricate complexity of adult human psychology involved in gradually getting to know someone. Workplace bullies are not going to give you the time for your complicated, multifaceted character to magically unfold. The minute they meet you, they've already made up their minds. And no amount of time will ever undo that rigid thinking. In the very real temper tantrums of children, we can also see their poor impulse control. It is basically an inappropriate expression of emotion, which is, in a nutshell, what workplace bullying is really all about. Workplace bullies bully not in response to anything the target has said or done, but instead in response to whatever weird, inexplicable emotion the bullies feel, sometimes in the physical presence of the target alone. Science has shown that bullies come from anxiety-inducing homes, and the anxiety that workplace bullies feel in the target's presence is palpable. It's tangible. I don't like to do black and white thinking. Unfortunately, there happens to be a lot of duality in this 3D reality. And the binary opposition of adult human psychology is that you really have only two choices. You can heal or you can project. I'll let you guess which one workplace bullies have chosen. It is a failure to self-regulate. Workplace bullies cannot self-edit, self-care, self-soothe, self-anything, because they don't have selves. Neither do children. They are all ego. Workplace bullies' immaturity is their failure to take responsibility for their own emotions and their insistence on making you accountable for their insecurities. So once again, you have to suffer because of workplace bullies' immaturity and insecurity. One of the reasons children react so, well, childishly is just their lack of verbal skills. They just don't have the vocab to articulate their needs. Unfortunately, again, it's exactly the same way with workplace bullies. In almost 3 decades of being bullied in the workplace, an interesting correlation that I have identified is that the worst bullies in the place also have the worst verbal skills. It's like, dude, what? That is literally 5 minutes of my life I will never get back. And that's because I believe there is a direct correlation between empathy and verbal skills. As non-narcissists, non-bullies, and normal people, we want people to feel comfortable in our presence because we have care and concern for the feelings of others. And confusion creates discomfort. So we speak clearly, concisely, and coherently. Poor verbal skills not only confuse people, they also waste people's time. In my country, there is an expression, time is money and money is time. Nothing makes people angrier than wasted time, and we don't want people to feel upset or angry in our presence. We get our verbal skills from reading. Reading teaches us to think abstractly and figuratively, and it also teaches us empathy by presenting us with situations and characters whose experiences may be wholly different from our own. Now, does that mean that if workplace bullies digest the entire Western literary canon, they will somehow magically become more empathetic? Doubtful. But I present this correlation that I have identified as an interesting hypothesis for further research, as well as a red flag indicator. Poor verbal skills is another sign and symptom that you have a workplace bully on your hands. Workplace bullies act not only like children, but also like animals, and that's because they act on instinct. In addition to the lack of boundaries and the lack of empathy, I'm going to go ahead and add a complete and total lack of self-awareness. As always, victims of abuse understand the psychology of abusers better than the abusers understand themselves. Workplace bullying is just this whole knee-jerk reaction to whatever emotion workplace bullies experience that even they themselves do not understand. A lot of workplace bullying can appear strategic, premeditated, calculated. It's not. There's not a lot of thought that goes into any of this, including about the consequences, which explains why workplace bullies are so surprised at your reaction to being bullied. You happen to kind of sort of like, not like it very much. And it explains why after bullying you, workplace bullies will come back as though everything's fine, everything's normal, nothing happened, and even expect a close personal relationship with you. a friendship, and even romantic, and yes, even sexual relationship. One of the things we as targets and victims of bullying and abuse really need to stop doing is over-ascribing, attributing way too much depth to abusers. It has got to stop. We have got to quit it. In an episode of This American Life, writer Elna Baker speaks about her weight loss experience. She was heavy and she wanted two things. She wanted a job and she wanted a relationship. However, those things were not working out for her, and she thought if she lost the weight, she would have more success. At the same time, she told herself that her problems in life could not just be about her weight. She was like, I cannot live in a world that is that superficial. There has got to be something deeper going on here. So she went to a weight loss program and she lost the weight, and sure enough, turns out she got everything she wanted. She got jobs and she got married. The title of the chapter of that episode is It's a Small World After All. It really was just about her weight. Integral to the definitions of all forms of narcissism is superficiality. Narcissists are living in the matrix, trapped in this earthly, mundane, physical, material, 3D reality, experiencing life exclusively through the five senses, without any imagination, creativity, or even abstract thought. Never underestimate the superficiality of narcissistic workplace bullies. Workplace bullies are not children, they're not animals either. What they really are is low-level spirits. It has nothing to do with their IQ, their level of education, what they do for a living, how much money they make, what kind of house they live in, what kind of car they drive, and everything to do with the quality of their spirit or lack thereof. Spiritually speaking, workplace bullies are people who eat in the pool with their clothes on. You can go to the pool and you can get in the pool with your clothes on, and you can order pizza and you can eat the pizza in the pool with your clothes on. After that, you can drink beer and smoke cigarettes in the pool with the pizza with your clothes on. You can do that if that works for you. As an empath, I love all of God's creatures and never want to insult any animal, but the whole point of being human is to be rational. Just because workplace bullies are superficial does not mean that we have to be. That's the whole point of Maslow's hierarchy. It's like a video game. After you accomplish one level, feel free to go ahead and move on up to the next level instead of cycling and recycling like gerbils on a treadmill through the lower levels of food, money, sex, image, not necessarily in that order, wash, rinse, repeat, ad nauseum. Just because superficial, narcissistic workplace bullies have no depth, that does not mean that we ourselves have to live lives without meaning and purpose. So that's a summary of a point I want to make about immaturity as a cause of workplace bullying. If you'd like to read more, I've written an essay on workplace bullying. It's on my website. I include that information in the description. The reason I create this video series is to establish a forum where targets of workplace bullying can share their stories and experiences in a kind of support group. So you can know, number one, you're not crazy. Workplace bullying is real, and your feelings are perfectly valid and justified. And number two, you're not alone. Unfortunately, countless others have experienced the same thing. So I look forward to reading your comments, and I'll try to respond. Take care.